Good morning, everyone. Um, I bet everybody can hear me okay. Think, yeah, looks like it. Oh, um, so, this is Kurt from Maryland, Rockville, Maryland. I hope everybody who's hearing this, seeing this, is safe and dry and healthy, doing well, wherever you are, in the Carolinas or Kentucky or we didn't get hit too bad here where I am by Helene. But this morning, um, this morning's talk is going to be kind of a story time. I'm going to read from a story by great Japanese Zen teacher Hakuin. So I'll just read it, and then if I'm going to try to read the whole story, and I might have something to say about it at the end if there's time. So here's the story, and this is a story that's called The Precious Mirror Cave. The Precious Mirror Cave, and it's from a collection of Hakuin's writings translated into English by Norman Waddell. And this collection of writings is actually named for this one story. So it's called, I think the title of the collection is called The Precious Mirror Cave. Anyway, so here's Hakuin. He gives a little bit of preamble at the beginning of the story before he gets into the story itself. The Buddha preached in the Flower Garland Sutra, that is the Avatamsaka Sutra. The Buddha preached in the Avatamsaka Sutra that a Buddha's body fills the entire universe. He said that it is constantly being revealed to living beings. If that is so, then everything the eye sees without exception should be the Tathagata's pure Dharma-body. Yet we are unable to see this Dharma-body anywhere because the eye of wisdom remains unopened in us. Another sutra, and so Hakuin doesn't tell you, but it's the Lotus Sutra that he's referring to in this preamble. Another sutra states that the Buddha is always residing right here, preaching the Dharma and leading the countless sentient beings to the path of liberation. If that is the case, everything our ears hear, without exception, should be the incomprehensibly deep and essential teaching preached by the Buddhas. Yet we are unable to hear that teaching because the wondrous ear that hears all things remains unopened in us as well. Back in the beginning years of the Kane period, 1624 to 1644, there was an old fisherman who lived in the village called Teishi in Kamo County in the province of Izu. Constantly lamenting the wretchedness of the work in which he was engaged, and deeply fearing the retribution that awaited him in the next life, he was always reciting the Nembutsu, never neglecting it in day or night. He told himself that although he was obliged to catch fish for a living, his real vocation was the Nembutsu. He recited it constantly, even when he was out on the ocean in his boat, and he would continue reciting it through the long nights, oblivious of all else, frequently forgetting to attend to his nets. And so if you're not familiar with Nembutsu, it's the practice of chanting the name of Amida Buddha, which in the Korean tradition is Namu Amida Bul. So he would just chant Namu Amida Bul, Namu Amida Bul, Namu Amida Bul. So he would continue reciting it through the long nights, oblivious when he was out fishing, oblivious of all else, frequently forgetting to attend to his nets. At times the old fisherman would see in the distance an uncanny radiance that seemed to float just above the surface of the waves. The strange light puzzled him, and one night he sculled his boat toward it. As he drew closer, he could make out the mouth of a sea cave among the rocky cliffs. The entrance was about 20 feet across. He steered his boat as close as he could and tried to peer inside, but the darkness was so intense that it was impossible for him to determine how far back the cave extended. The entrance closed and opened with the rising and falling of the tide, and at high tide the sea rushed in, filling the cave completely. The fisherman waited for a day when the tide was low, and sculled his boat to the cave entrance. Using his oar, he poled his way slowly and apprehensively through the opening in the rocky cliff. Once inside, he was able, by pushing and fending against the sides of the cave, to work his boat 20 feet or so back into the darkness. The deeper he went, the blacker it became. In spite of himself, his knees began to quake, his blood ran cold, and he was thrown into a state of panic. On the point of fainting away, he suddenly knelt down, put his palms together in gasho, and began reciting the Nembutsu. After 10 repetitions, his fear gradually subsided, and he experienced a calmness and tranquility. He experienced a calmness and tranquility in both body and mind. Let me read that again. After 10 repetitions, his fears gradually subsided, and he experienced a calmness and tranquility in both body and mind. Presently, he slowly opened his eyes. The inside of the cave was glowing in radiant, golden light that seemed to penetrate the very depths of his being. He noticed a strange fragrance that seemed to be wafting through the cavern. Gazing intently into the light, he could see the ineffably marvelous form of the Buddha of infinite light, that is Amitabha Buddha, standing solemnly and serenely with his 2 attendant bodhisattvas at his sides, and those are Avalokiteshvara and Mahastamaprapta. Those are the 2 other bodhisattvas that the fisherman saw. They were figures of pure gold, arrayed in inexpressible majesty. The narrow confines of the cave had been transformed into the vast infinitude of the universe itself, and within it, the Buddha's body seemed to tower up for thousands upon thousands of feet. The old fisherman began to intone the Nembutsu, tears of joy pouring down his cheeks. His body and mind both seemed to vanish, and before he knew it, several hours had passed. He was suddenly aware of the waves breaking angrily against the rocky cliffs outside the cave. Afraid that the inflowing tide would block the mouth of the cave, he paid a tearful farewell to the figure of Amida Buddha and poled his boat out through the cave entrance into the ocean, all the while repeating Nembutsu. When he returned, he astonished his fellow villagers with the story of what had transpired, sending a wave of excitement through the surrounding area. Soon endless throngs of people were making their way to the cliffside, eager to enter the cave. They would wait there until the low tide revealed the opening in the rocks, then pole their way inside to pay homage to the Buddha. No sooner were they inside than they would fling themselves down in obeisance, weeping loudly in gratitude, their faces glistening with sweat. Some would prostrate themselves and begin reciting the Nembutsu with palms pressed together in gasho, weeping and emitting inarticulate cries of thanks. Some would only peer around, looks of disappointment written on their faces. Others would survey the goings-on around them dubiously, gazing around with mouths turned in derisive smiles. Their reactions were different, owing to the differences in what they saw, and those differences were in turn the result of the amount of faith they possessed and the comparative depth of their delusion. Those who wept loud and profuse tears of gratitude did so because they were worshipping the majestic figure of a Tathagata rising 3 to 5 feet or 10 to 20 feet into the cave's pure golden light. They were the superior practitioners. Those who prostrated themselves and fervently repeated the Nembutsu worshipped a sacred golden figure 6 or 7 inches in height, emitting a radiant, glittering light. These were average, ordinary devotees. Those who looked around them with expressions of disappointment on their faces did not see any golden radiance to worship, nor could they smell the precious fragrance. They moved about self-importantly, telling the others that there was nothing in the cave but 3 blackened pieces of burnt-out wood, 3 to 5 inches high, standing in a row in the darkness, with no eyes or noses or other distinguishable features. They attempted to discourage the enthusiasm in the others, directing accusations at the old fisherman. It's his fault, they said, deceiving people with these stories, getting them all worked up over nothing at all. These were the inferior practitioners. The ones who gazed around them uncertainly, with derisive smiles on their lips, were dull and ignorant men and women who know nothing of the Buddhist principles of cause and effect in the 3 worlds. Those who gather bits of information from popular works on Buddhism throw in a lot of nonsense they hear from others and make pretense of being well informed. In fact, they are no different from non-Buddhist types who believe neither in existence after death nor in karmic retribution. Eishin Sozu, a priest who was not only embraced by the compassion of the Buddhas, but was esteemed by the Japanese kami as well, the kami that is the ancient gods and goddesses of Japan, used to say that people of great faith see a great Buddha, while people of little faith see a small Buddha. I'm going to read that again. Eishin Sozu, a priest who was not only embraced by the compassion of the Buddhas, but was esteemed by the Japanese kami as well, used to say that people of great faith see a great Buddha, while people of little faith see a small Buddha. This is a thought that I, for one, have never ceased to cherish. There is not the least difference between what Eishin said and these people entering the cave and seeing things differently according to the strength of their faith and the weight of their karmic burden. It is as though they are standing before a bright mirror, totally unable to avoid having all their goodness or evilness, beauty or ugliness, and everything else reflected just exactly as it is. That is why I would like to name the cave in the cavern in the sea cliff, the Cave of the Precious Mirror, or Mirror Rock Cavern. It has in recent times become popularly known as the Amida Cave. Someone said, I have heard that Buddhas are endowed with 3 different bodies. Should a Tathagata such as the one that appeared in the Cave of the Precious Mirror be regarded as a Dharma-body, a recompense body, or a transformation body? And you might have heard these referred to as the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. Inasmuch as the reason Tathagatas appear in the world is to benefit sentient beings, one would assume that they would manifest themselves in some well-inhabited place, a village or town or large city. Why would a Tathagata choose to appear here in a spot so remote from human habitation, inside a dangerous sea cave where you have to brave the elements, waiting for good weather and a favorable tide before you can worship him? I have also heard that Tathagatas have appeared in the world one after another for the fundamental purpose of making people aware of the path of the Buddha and awakening them to his wisdom. If so, why is the Venerable One of infinite life the only Buddha that teaches we should go and be reborn in the Pure Land? It is true, I answered. So now Hakuin is answering these questions. Buddhas have 3 bodies. The Dharma-body is their essential substance. The recompense and transformation bodies their essential activity. A Tathagata such as the one who appears in the Cave of the Precious Mirror may be called a Dharma-body, a recompense body, or a transformation body. Every place and everything, the realms of heaven and hell, the lands of purity and impurity, the mountains and rivers, the great earth, the world of Buddhas, and the court of Mara, plants and grasses, groves and thickets, is without exception the true Dharma-body of the Buddha. The Dharma-body is always calm and tranquil. It is never apart from you for an instant. no matter where you are. It is never apart from you for an instant, no matter where you are. But unless you are one of the superior seekers who have attained Kensho, you are unable to see it. For that reason, the Buddhas manifest a recompense body or transformation body to help sentient beings reach deliverance. If, in accordance with your personal ability and karmic circumstances, you diligently practice seated meditation, recite sutras, repeat the Nembutsu, and undertake to live according to the precepts until discrimination ceases and illusory thoughts are exhausted, you will reach the field of absolute single-mindedness and enter into the full and perfect freedom of samadhi, where you will suddenly be one with the Tathagata's true Dharma-body. This is what is called Kensho, seeing into your true nature. When this happens, the fivefold eye suddenly opens, allowing you to see all things with perfect clarity. The four wisdoms are all immediately attained. This in and of itself is the way of enlightenment, the opening up of Buddha wisdom that the Buddhas proclaim as their fundamental purpose, the instant when you attain the ultimate truth and discern your true nature. Okay, I'm going to skip a little bit to get to, let's see. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So then Hakuin says what he did when he heard about this story. So he was about 70 years old when he is retelling this story. Although I am a foolish old man living here in a remote province, far removed from the place where the events in the story took place, the news of the Buddha's appearance in the precious mirror cave reached my ears. It moved me so deeply I could think of nothing but seizing this marvelous opportunity and somehow making my way to Kamo County in Izu Province, and availing myself of Amida Buddha's marvelous power to prostrate myself before this august figure and pray for rebirth in his Pure Land. Dressing in pilgrim's guise and accompanied by 4 or 5 others, I was finally able to make my way there. Hiring a dubious little boat from a fisherman, we poled our way into the cave. Once inside, we bowed deeply in obeisance and recited the Nembutsu. One of the men burst into tears the instant he saw the figure, prostrating himself and repeating the Buddha's name over and over. Another man pressed his palms together in gassho and began sobbing out loud repetitions of the Nembutsu upon seeing the sacred form, his eyes filled with tears and gratitude. Another moved about the cave despondently, a look of disappointment on his face. "What have you seen that makes you sob like that?" he asked. "I can't make out a single shape in this darkness. I wish I could see something, even if it was only a paper cutout, so I could share in the joy all of you seem to experience." He kept stretching his neck forward into the darkness and straining to see, scratching his head and moving nervously in all directions. Meantime, worshipping in the darkness, I could see only the flickering light caused by the movement of the waves. I could not make out the Buddha's full moon face or blue lotus eyes, although I did see something that looked like Buddha figures standing in a row. Sitting in the boat, worshipping them, I felt a slight awakening of faith stir within me. Whatever it was I was seeing, I was sure it was a rare and wonderful thing, and I prostrated myself and continued repeating the Nembutsu. So Hakuin then goes on to say that, when I returned home, at first I felt a certain sense of regret that a 70-year-old man like me had traveled such a distance to worship Amida without really achieving my objective. Upon greater reflection, however, I realized that the heart of Amida Buddha would not harbor feelings of like or dislike, that any such discriminations were the results of my own lack of faith. I felt ashamed at having felt such regrets, and I decided that I would repent. My past karma that hindered me, fear and suffering awaiting in the next life, fearing the suffering that awaits me in the next life, and devote myself with total sincerity to single-minded repetition of the Nembutsu. When half a year had passed, I made another trip to the Amida cave. This time, it was entirely different. I succeeded in worshiping the Buddha in splendid fashion and found myself drenched in tears of gratitude. It made me realize that someone like me, living in this degenerate age of the latter-day Dharma, and immersed in the cycle of rebirth, could not hope for a better teacher than Amida. Why should I leave him and go somewhere else? I decided to stay right where I was and exert myself for the rest of my days on Amida's behalf. If I should die in doing this, I could hope for no better karma. And so I gave up my aspiration to live as a pilgrim, traveling and worshiping at sacred sites around the country. Instead, I threw myself, body and soul, into the single practice of Nembutsu. And so, anyway, so this is I'm just going to finish up. There's a little bit. Oh no, wait a minute. Okay, this is how Hakuin ends the story. It is my fervent hope and prayer that the favorable karmic link I have achieved will enable me to break through the devilish net of birth and death, hand in hand with all other sentient beings, and achieve forthwith the realm of unshakable single-mindedness, creating a Pure Land, encountering the Amida that exists in the mind alone. And so this cave exists. Norman Waddell, the guy who translated this story, has visited it and saw something. He's a little vague about what he saw. But in the part that I skipped over, Hakuin says that he built a little hut next to the mouth of the cave, probably more than a little hut, but it was a place for people to come and wait, gather and prepare for the journey into the cave. You have to go and wait until the tide is low and then get in a boat. You can, even when the tide is low, you can still only get in through a boat, but you have to wait until the conditions are right, and not only does the tide have to be low, but the weather has to be good enough so that you can the waves can't be too high, or else it's impossible to get into the cave at all. So the point of this story, well, it's a great story in and of itself. Hakuin calls it the precious mirror cave because what we see, what we hear, comes from the mind alone. And so if we don't see Amida, that comes from our mind. If we do see Amida Buddha, that comes from our mind as well. So I'm just going to go back to the very beginning, read again this little preamble. Yeah. The Buddha preached in the Avatamsaka Sutra that a Buddha's body fills the entire universe. He said that it is constantly being revealed to living beings. If that is so, then everything the eye sees, without exception, should be the Tathagata's pure Dharma-body. Yet we are unable to see this Dharma-body because we are able to see this Dharma-body anywhere because the eye of wisdom remains unopened in us. Another sutra states that the Buddha is always residing right here, preaching the Dharma and leading the countless sentient beings to the path of liberation. If that is the case, everything our ears hear, without exception, should be the incomprehensibly deep and essential teaching preached by the Buddhas. Yet we are unable to hear that teaching because the wondrous ear that hears all things remains unopened to us as well. And then also, I'll just finally end with how Hakuin ends the story, with Hakuin's wish. It is my fervent hope and prayer that the favorable karmic link I have achieved, Hakuin has achieved, will enable me to break through the devilish net of birth and death, and hand in hand with all other beings, and achieve forthwith the realm of unshakable single-mindedness, creating a Pure Land and encountering the Amida that exists in the mind alone. Thank you for listening. 5-minute walking period.